Hello, and welcome to Navigating the Clerkship Process for students of color and first generation law students. My name is Phil Brest, and I'm the president of the American Constitution Society, the nation's leading network of progressive lawyers. This program is co-sponsored by the Appellate Project, an organization which equips future appellate lawyers with the tools and support they need to thrive at every stage of their careers through mentorship, resources, and community. I want to thank our distinguished judges and moderator for sharing their wisdom with you today. Before I turn it over to them, I want to briefly touch on what ACS has to offer its members who are interested in clerking. Part of our mission is building up the next generation of progressive and public interest attorneys through programming, career development, and help with the clerkship application process. Because a clerkship is often a near prerequisite to becoming a judge, we see clerkship assistance as an extension of our Path to the Bench project. The judges confirmed 15 to 20 years from now will largely come from the pool of clerks, law clerks today. Accordingly, we place special emphasis on helping talented and progressive students with diverse backgrounds and experiences find clerkships. In addition to public programs like this, we can help individual members navigate this sometimes opaque and highly competitive process. Each year, we match students and new graduates with former clerks in the ACS network as part of our mentor matching program. We also select approximately 40 clerkship candidates as part of our clerkship assistance cohort. This group of future progressive public interest legal leaders will receive special help with their clerkship application process, which may include counseling sessions, help with their list of judges, review of application materials, connections with former clerks and others who know the judge, and we have 4 terrific judges here today, and direct recommendations to judges where appropriate. The goal of the clerkship cohort is to give connections, knowledge, and support to students who may not have had those advantages when they entered law school. We're also looking for candidates who will remain part of the ACS network and share their knowledge and experience as mentors for the generation of lawyers that follows them. The application for both programs is open to all ACS members, and it closes on February 23rd, 2026. We will share a link to the application in the chat at the end of the program. Before we get started, I want to give all of our best wishes to Justice Anita Earls, who recently announced she's been diagnosed with breast cancer. Justice Earls, your strength and perseverance are an inspiration to all of us, and we wish you all the best for a speedy recovery. Now, of course, now I will turn it over to Justin Lam to start the program and introduce our panelists. Off to you, Justin.
Thank you so much, Phil, and welcome everyone. My name is Justin Lam, and I am a counsel in the Brennan Center for Justice's Voting Rights and Elections program. I'm also a proud alum and now board member of the Appellate Project. And ACS and the Appellate Project both gave me mentorship and support that enabled me to clerk in a federal district court and a state appellate court. And my hope is that the next hour can give you in the audience the support you need to begin or continue your clerkship journey. On today's panel, we are excited to have Judge Ana de Alba, United States Court of Appeals for the Ninth Circuit, Justice Anita Earls, North Carolina Supreme Court, Judge Carlton Reeves, of the United States District Court for the Southern District of Mississippi, and Magistrate Judge Zia Faruqi of the United States District Court for the District of Columbia. So today we'll discuss what brought each of our panelists to the bench, why representative courts matter, what advice our panelists have for preparing yourself to apply and applying, what questions you, the audience, have. Then we'll wrap up by asking for some parting words of advice from our panelists and turning it over to ACS and TAP for any resources. Please feel free to put questions in the chat throughout the presentation, but know that I will wait till question and answer time to bring them to our panelists. So to begin, what led each of our panelists, what led each of you to the bench? And I'm particularly interested in the roles that mentorship from a clerkship or otherwise played in your career paths. And perhaps we can just go in order. We'll start with Judge de Alba.
Well, hello, everyone. I'm so excited to get to be here with you. I am one of a very small handful of judges on the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals who never clerked before becoming a judicial officer. I don't recommend it. If you can clerk, I would clerk. It's a tremendous experience. I grew up in a very small town in the Central Valley. I'm the daughter of Mexican immigrant farm workers. So mentorship was huge for me because I didn't know anyone who was a lawyer or a judge or even in the legal profession. I had former employers who were amazing mentors to me. I went to law school at Berkeley, enjoyed my time there, and I came back to the Central Valley to begin my practice. The managing partner of my law firm took me under his wing and really, really helped me. I happened to really enjoy what I did, so I was good at it. So that's one little piece of advice I would give everyone is, pick a career choice that you are good at because you will be more likely to excel at it. So, and also don't limit yourself to who you expect would be a great mentor. The managing partner at my firm and I had nothing in common. He was the son of a judge. He had every sort of, you know, advantage in this sort of career than you can think of, and I had nothing. And yet we're still friends to this day. So that's kind of where I'm from. I grew up in Los Palos. I went to school at Berkeley, Berkeley undergrad, Berkeley Law, and I came and started my practice at Fresno. I had the privilege of being a judge on three separate courts. I was first a Superior Court judge here in Fresno, then I was a district judge in the Eastern District of California, and now I sit on the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals.
Thank you. Perhaps we can go next, Justice Earls, then Judge Reeves and Judge Faruqi.
Yes, well, hello, and thank you all so much. I'm really thrilled to have this chance to be on such a distinguished panel, and I love the ACS. So anytime you ask me to do something, I will say yes. The My path was not necessarily intentional. I wanted to be a civil rights attorney. I grew up in Seattle, Washington. Also, did not have lawyers in the family or any necessary understanding really of what a civil rights lawyer would be until I got to Ferguson Stein Law Firm in Charlotte and learned what that practice is about. I ended up on the bench because after 30 years of practicing civil rights law, it was clear to me that we needed folks in our state courts as well as federal courts with a civil rights background, that I had been litigating civil rights cases in both court systems, had argued voting rights cases in our state Supreme Court, and realized that I was arguing to a bench that had no prior real experience in that area of the law, and that the diversity on the bench needs to be in practice area as well as all sorts of along other lines. And I will say, so what was influential to me? Nobody recruited me. I I I remember in North Carolina we elect our judges in partisan elections, and I asked the Democratic Party chair in 2018 when I was thinking of running what they were looking for, and I promise you that what he described was nothing like me. um, and so I had to broaden people's perspectives about what kind of professional background might look right for the bench. Um, but also will say that I was quite influenced by a couple of panels that I attended at ACS's national conference, where they had people talking about recruiting for judicial positions, and the fact that, for example, women have to be asked multiple times to step up to the plate, typically, and just hearing people talk about the process of, and I think that if my recollection is correct, they're mostly talking about federal courts, but I could analogize to state courts, and so that was influential and very helpful to me. But I also had to know how to learn and know how to run a political campaign. So for my role, there were a couple of qualifications that were required. But I think that I continue to believe that it is so vitally important that we have people from a variety of practice backgrounds on our state Supreme Courts. I continue to believe that state courts are a place to protect our rights, and I am continually grateful for ACS's role in helping make all that happen. So thank you.
Oh, Judge Reeves, you might be on mute.
As Justice Earl said, I'm deeply indebted to the ACS as well for the work that they've done over the years in allowing me to participate with them on a number of occasions. Um, I, I always wanted to be a judge. Now, whether that would happen, I don't know. But it started probably back at least in college. I knew I wanted to be a lawyer growing up in Yazoo City, Mississippi, in elementary to high school. Never met lawyers, did not know lawyers. But after having gone to Jackson State and being mentored by my political science professors and my pre-law program headed by Charles Holmes, who was an attorney, I knew that there was something special about judging. We took courses on constitutional law, judicial process, legal research and writing, intro to law, and things like that. And from there, I realized the power of judges. Judges, in my view, are heroes, but for federal judges in particular. But for federal judges, the Mississippi that I grew up in the late 1960s and early 70s, really the 1970s, would not have been the Mississippi any different from my parents. So I saw the power that judges had in my own personal life, having played segregated baseball, summer league, and things like that. I saw it from not my class of 1970. My first grade class was the first class to be integrated, for example, and that's 16 years after Brown. So I knew that there was something special about judges. And so I decided that because I was also very interested in politics as well. And so that's what I studied in undergraduate. And I knew I was going to go to law school. And I knew that I wanted to be a judge. Now, how I was going to be a judge, I didn't know. I did, but I knew I learned something about clerking a little bit through Dr. Holmes, who again was my pre-law advisor. So I knew at University of Virginia when I was in school that I wanted to be a law clerk. I did not know how that might happen, what I would need to do to make that happen. Fortunately, it did happen. I clerked for the first African American Supreme Court justice here in Mississippi. I was involved. I did various sort of practices through my life. My own founded. The last part of my practice was having founded my firm. Prior to that, and in between the time of clerkship, I was at the U.S. Attorney's Office on the civil side. I was very active in the legal and political community. One of the things that I was the president of our Magnolia Bar Association, which was the Black Bar Association, if you will, that was founded out of necessity, but that has never discriminated against anyone. But I was the president of that organization, and working through that organization, we saw judicial nominees that did not look like me for decades. And so one of the things that we spoke out against was the lack of diversity in our judicial appointments throughout the South, throughout Mississippi, throughout the country. Well, at that time it was the Bush administration, second Bush administration. And so we were active in raising the decibel level about the lack of diversity. So along my path, that was one of the things that I talked about, and this opportunity came about because there remained a vacancy at the district court here in Jackson, and I was the one who put my name in the hat for that, and fortunately, it happened. So in getting to this point, the only thing that I would say is that relationships matter. Do not burn any bridges. Believe it or not, Anita Earls and I go back to 1988 because I had the fortunate opportunity to work at the law firm where she was a first or second year associate. And mentorship began there, at least between the two of us. And so from that, don't burn any bridges. Relationships matter, and be ready for the moment. Whenever that moment might come to you, please do not have, please do not have done something which disqualifies you from being able to grasp hold to your opportunity for greatness because it's going to come. You just have to make sure you're ready and that you're ready to go when it comes. So I always wanted to do it, and I love doing it. And so that's where I'll stop, and I'll listen to my good friend Farouk here.
Well, Judge, it's great. I love that Judge Reeves talking about judges being heroes because Judge Reeves is one of my heroes for the work that he's done on the bench. Really issued some incredible opinions, but also on the Sentencing Commission and the work that he's done to support reentry courts. And so it's thrilled to be on this call with one hero and now two more to add to the list. I have to also correct Judge De Alba. It's not Fresno, it's Fres. Yes, I've learned that from my Fresno friends. So. A lot of similar through lines to what the folks are saying on here, so I don't want to belabor. I just, I co-sign on everything these wonderful judges have said. I myself grew up in suburbs of Baltimore, Maryland. My father passed away when I was pretty young, so single mom, went to community college. Clerkship was not on my radar. Being a judge was certainly even further not on my radar. I echo what Judge De Alba said. I think do as we say, not as we do. Definitely clerk. It's a great path, and perhaps I think for any outcome, but especially if you're interested in the judiciary, it's a great way to get a sense of what you could be, perhaps a preview of what you could or could not want to do. So I think it's great on many levels. But there's no way that my mom would have. I mean, she would have hunted me down if I told her I had a job at a big law firm and I was going to stand down for 1 year on that salary and go work for a judge. And I think, kind of to Judge Reeves' point, my perception of what judges look like at the time, and probably hers as well, was that wasn't a very diverse group of people and that they weren't very interested in me. And so, at the time, my misperception would have been, although I lacked any perception, was that it was neither a good personal or financial decision if you'd asked me that. But I truly didn't even know. It was a total blind spot. I didn't know what a clerkship was, but I couldn't have been further from the truth. It is a challenge, and I think recognize that. Judges recognize that. I always tell students, make sure you're talking about in your interviews that this is public service. For many of you, you would have other opportunities that are of greater salary, and so you need to recognize, it's not just about the mentorship and things like this, that you care about the judiciary, you care about public service. Highlight that in your interview because it is that. But I think from a purely financial perspective, it also will, in the long run, it does make a ton of financial sense. Will bear out to be a wise decision. It is hard, can be for that 1 year. Federal clerkships pay a little better in some cases than state court clerkships, but regardless, it's worth the sacrifice for the gains that you're going to get, particularly people like us on this call who have been in situations where we didn't have a lot of mentors, that didn't have a lot of access to networks. You get a lot of that through the clerkship. I mean, you get someone to be sort of a real force, hopefully, for your networking and mentoring as you go along. And I'll really encourage you, again, what Judge De Alba said, don't just look for people who look and sound like you. That's great when you find them. They may have shared experiences, but you'll also find, for me, my experience in becoming a judge is I was encouraged by a former prosecutor who I had worked with, who shared nothing in my background, and he encouraged me to pick up the phone and cold call one of the district judges here, and I did that. And that judge, again, who shares almost nothing, probably similarities in backgrounds, and now our chief judge, Judge Boasberg, he immediately was extremely supportive, and it's like, what can we do? He's like, we need to get you into end of court. I didn't even know what that was, and I've been practicing for years. And so there are little things like these little life hacks that you might not know about that other people do, but they want to pay it forward. So go and find them. And so not only don't burn any bridges, but build bridges. I'll close by saying, building on Judge Reeves' comments.
Thank you all for that. And on a very similar veins to what each of you have raised, would one of you be willing to share a challenge or barrier that you've faced in your career and how that's shaped your approach to justice?
I'm happy to talk about that. So let me kind of set the scene for you. I am the daughter of Mexican immigrant farm workers. I grew up in Dos Palos. In the little town where I grew up, there's the population's 5,000 people. I would say nearly 50% were at the poverty level. That was their income, nearly 50%. That included my family by far. All of the kids worked. We all worked in the fields so that we could contribute to just food. I mean, it wasn't any luxury stuff so we could take a trip to Disneyland. It was so we could eat. I slept on the floor until I was 15. I didn't even have a bed. That's the kind of poor we were. But my mother always instilled in us that that didn't matter, that we were still expected to excel. We were still expected to do right by people, to be honest, to be hardworking, and to not throw ourselves pity parties. My mom was very famous for asking us, is this worth crying over? The answer was always no. Sometimes it was frustrating, but a lot of times the grit that she was able to instill in us is what propelled all of us forward. So I have 3 older brothers. We're all professionals. But a big barrier, I think, for me that I think many people on this call may also appreciate is feeling like I don't fit in. Like maybe I'm not good enough. I don't have the right background. I don't have the right parents. I don't have the right education. I don't have the right something, right? I didn't know how to set a table, let alone eat with the right fork and the right spoon, and which was my water glass and which was my neighbor's water glass. Those little things that in the big scheme of things are no big deal, but when you're sitting there living it, you feel so embarrassed and so out of place, and you feel like there's a spotlight on you that nobody, everybody can tell you don't belong. You absolutely belong. You absolutely belong, and you are needed here. You are absolutely needed here because you will bring a perspective to this that, as Judge Reeves mentioned, as Judge Faruqi mentioned, as Justice Earl mentioned, it is very needed. It is very needed, right? My perspective, I can tell you what it's like not to eat as a kid. I know what that feels like. I know what it feels like to be dismissed because of some perceived, immigration status. Frankly, I've had that issue too when I was a kid growing up. And so being able to now sit on one of the most impactful courts of the country is just so inspiring for me, but also it lets you know that here, this is one of those countries where we can accomplish, we can make change, and we need to be there. The biggest thing though is to put yourself out there to do that. And that can be very difficult. It can feel very isolating. It can feel like you don't belong, you're never going to fit in, you don't understand. But the biggest thing I can tell you is you don't need to fit in so much to them, is that they need to learn how to expand their views so that they understand that you probably represent more of America than they have. So that's what I would say about that.
Which is a perfect segue into the next thing I was going to ask if one or two of you would like to pick up on this point. I'm curious how, from where each of you sit, how does representation in the courts, particularly among underrepresented communities, impact chambers and the pursuit of justice? And how is clerking connected to that?
Um, it's important, in my view, to have diverse chambers. I guess two very quick stories. There was a woman who worked at a hospital here in Jackson who was suing the hospital pro se employment discrimination, national origin, and race. She was Chinese. She was Chinese American. It so happened that that year I had a gentleman in my chambers uh, whose undergraduate uh, degree was in Mandarin Chinese. And so when we were having a pretrial conference, this woman working pro se didn't know anything of the legal process is daunting even for lawyers. Imagine a person, pro se person, whose second language or first language certainly in English, because he had difficulty communicating in that way. Uh, During the time to meet with her and talk to her about her case, I had my law clerk come in and, and speak to her and talk to her, separate and apart from everybody, just to give her some comfort. because she appreciated, he walked in, he's a young white guy who went to Ole Miss and studied Mandarin Chinese. And she opened up. She appreciated, she felt like justice at least had opened up as a possibility for her. The next instance is, uh, as a judge, obviously you have all kinds of cases that come before you. And I was the judge who was the trial judge in the Dobbs case. So during that clerkship term, I had two female law clerks to work with me, along with my permanent clerk, who was a white male. And as I was drafting and working on what we would say about the suit and how it would come about, and the various memos and drafts that we shared back and forth with one another's, uh, the young women came and told me, because I'd added a line. It was just one line. I added a line in there, and they came and said, Judge, and I don't remember what that line was. Say, Judge, you can't say that. I mean, it's pretty innocuous to me, I would think. I mean, I'm not trying to say anything that harms it, but they said, Judge, you cannot say that from a perspective of a woman. And, one of the uh, best comments I ever gotten on anything that I wrote was a tweet that night from some person who identified in the tweet. I don't know the person, some female, and she tweeted out. She said, "Oh my God, it sounds just as if a woman wrote this opinion." I said, well, I had female clerks who advised the writing of the opinion. So having those perspectives matter. We see all kinds of people who come before us, some of whom come to us on the worst day of their lives. And there's really might not be no future life other than behind some prison wall, maybe. But to have persons in chambers who are sensitive to the needs of all those out there seeking justice and all is so extraordinarily important in my view. So that's what I would say about that, Justin.
If I can address that from the slightly different role that I think appellate courts have. And, we don't as often, sometimes they're there, but we don't as often see the actual litigants in the courtroom during oral arguments. I certainly think it impacts the direction of the development of the law because different people have different perspectives on, our court is now a court where you only get in front of us if we allow your petition. And so it impacts what we think are important issues. So in that way, it impacts how our jurisprudence develops. But I also think that it makes a difference. And so I am at a court now where I'm the only person of color on a 7-member bench. And I have tried to address the concerns that I have about the lack of racial diversity, both in terms of who argues in front of us, and as well as the personnel of our court. So North Carolina Supreme Court, at the time that I was able to get data, hired 72 people. So that's not the justices, but everybody else. So law clerks, clerk of court, those staff, the reporter's office. And out of those 72 people, only 2 were African American. And that included one of my executive assistants and the gentleman who runs the buildings and grounds. So I understand the importance within my chambers of having diverse clerks and interns. And this was especially brought home, and I don't know if it's still available, but I had the tragic circumstances of one of my summer interns who was working full time with us, died tragically in a motorcycle accident while he was clerking. He was actually an African immigrant. His parents were from West Africa, and he'd grown up in Atlanta. But just a wonderful young man, friends of everybody. And but he and one other clerk were the only Black men at our court. And so the other student during the memorial service that we had for my intern who died, talked about the incredible loss now that he has no one else he can talk to about the experience of being in our courthouse and the the way he felt that he was being treated by some of the other justices' chambers and the challenges of navigating that environment. And so when I understand that I sit on a court, there's 7 of us and we have different priorities in how we choose our clerks. And I cannot control what the other chambers do. And I cannot make a completely safe environment. Let me just say that. So I recognize that. And I appreciate the need to try to do all I can to support all of my clerks in everything, clerks and interns in everything they attempt. But it brings home for me the importance of having people that folks can talk to, can identify with, people who understand, people who get it. And so just in terms of creating creating an environment within my chambers where everyone who works with me can get the full advantage of being able to focus on the work of the court and developing their legal skills and not have to deal with all the extraneous things that they shouldn't have to deal with because of race. I recognize that I need a diverse environment in order to be able to do that, and I'm not always able to impact that.
Thank you so much to both of you for sharing. So now that we've talked about the values that representation plays in courts, as well as some of our incredible panelists' trajectories to the bench, I want to turn to a little bit of brass tacks before we go to Q&A. And we'll start with that by asking each of you, we can go in reverse order, starting with Judge Faruqi. What is your court like, and what does a typical day look like for a clerk in your chambers?
Sure. At a magistrate judge event, someone told this joke, and so we'll see how it resonates with my colleagues here. They said that there were judges out at like a hunting event, and they were allowed to. They were there to hunt, let's say, quail, and so they're out at the hunting event, and the circuit judge is there and says, well, what is a quail? I've got to define quail first. And so the judge, she doesn't shoot the gun because she's thinking about this time. The district judge goes and he sees something and he shoots. And then before you come, the magistrate judge just comes out shooting and says, "What? I shoot first and ask questions later." So maybe that's and that was a little bit of a backhanded insult for my colleagues, but also hopefully just give you a sense. We're earlier on in the process, and so we're oftentimes at a point where it's very high paced. We don't handle felony trials as magistrate judges. We do misdemeanors, which depending on the districts, there can be a lot or very little. But on the civil side, with the parties' consent, our appeals go directly to the circuit, or otherwise it goes to a district judge. A typical day, I think, I think it's different than from the district judges. I think there's probably a lot of similarities, but for a magistrate judge, it's very provincial. Some districts, like the Northern District of California, Eastern District of New York, they really have pushed up their consent jurisdiction, and so the magistrate judges are on the wheel. They're getting cases assigned to them. In other districts, like in Minnesota, I think that's less the case. We're sort of in between in DC, but that's more of the sort of substantive part. I mean, for me personally, I'd say the day-to-day is very different, I think, for my chambers than my neighbors. And that's, I think, goes back to some of the conversations you heard the judges already engaging in. I really value mentorship. So I have high school students who intern here. I know there are some other judges who do that as well. We set up workshops for them to try to help them as they pursue college, which hasn't always been a path that might have been open to them based on their background. And so I try to take as many opportunities as I can to get students in here and to have clerks and interns managing them and supporting them, as well as looking for opportunities to participate in programming at the DC jail So for me, an average day is always going to be the same as for a lot of clerks, at least in the 9 to 5 has a lot of research and writing, but it's also going to have other kind of pro bono or outside of the work opportunities that I think are really important. They shape sort of my view on judging, and they come from just my lived experience.
With respect to me, I'm on the district court here in Jackson, Mississippi. So most of my docket is civil cases, but quite a bit of criminal cases. So you have motions and stuff and that are filed in each civil case. The law clerks work on those motions with me. So right now I'm in the middle of a criminal trial, so that law clerks get an opportunity to be with me at every phase of whatever I'm doing. If it's a settlement conference, if it's a pretrial conference, if on the criminal side of things, if it's a meeting with someone who's just started their supervision, a planned process that I now engage in and meet with each person who has now served their sentence and is now about to be reintegrated back into the community, have a meeting with them, because I want the law clerks to see everything that it is that I do with respect to any type of hearing that is scheduled on any case, whether civil or criminal, to get involved in the sentencing process, attending guilty plea hearings, just seeing every aspect of the case. And the law clerks are primarily responsible because I do believe you also have the opportunity and should take the opportunity to have externs for those persons who might be thinking about trying to become a law clerk or to see what it's like. To have them come through chambers, and they are supervised by the law clerks. So everything that I do with respect to my job, my clerks are with me in some way, helping me write speeches and everything else, because helping me with my sentencing commission work. They're with me at all phases, and I appreciate them for being willing to be with me on everything that I do.
Well, skipping to state court, we have oral arguments, and each chief justice can set the calendar as they wish in North Carolina. That's their statutory duty. So and I've served under 3 different chiefs, but a current chief has us scheduled for 2 weeks of oral argument 4 times a year. So 2 weeks back to back, 20 cases, which is a lot of cases to learn the records in. But so my clerks do bench memos. We also do petition memos, which are circulated to the entire court. So important writing that my colleagues see, recommending either to deny a petition or allow it and hear the case. And then, of course, they help me with the opinions, majority occasionally and more often dissents, but they are writing draft opinions. And I think so that means there's a lot. There's a lot of my clerks there might be a whole week where they're just coming in, researching, writing. Very different when we have oral arguments. Obviously, they're in the courtroom if they wish to be. And I think one of the things that is most useful when is preparing for oral arguments. So we have a session, and it usually takes maybe a day and a half or 2 days, 2 full days to prepare for those 2 weeks of oral arguments. And that's where the clerk who's written the bench memo will present the case. So they'll, and this is really a good opportunity to improve your oral skills as well as your writing skills. So you present the case, what the issues are, what your recommendation is in the bench memo, and then we all discuss it, ask questions, go back and forth on the analysis, legal analysis, maybe identify some additional research that I want to have done before the oral argument. So clerks play a really key role in helping me prepare for oral argument. We do try to have some additional opportunities for professional development. So in the summer, we host a moot court exercise for all of the clerks in our court who want to participate. And I also invite my clerks to come with me to any professional meetings, in any opportunity to interact with the bar, with the public, because it is a behind the scenes role. But I take very seriously, how can I make this experience, whether it's an internship or a clerkship, how can I make that meaningful for the whatever next job my clerks want to have.
So similar to that, my chambers is somewhat unique. We, for example, we'll host field trips every Friday. We have field trips for kids as young as elementary school students all the way through high school students. We do a preliminary hearing where we arraign Sid from Toy Story. My clerks will give an example, one of them will be Sid, and I get an actual federal public defender to defend Sid. I get an actual assistant U.S. attorney to prosecute Sid, and then the AUSA is kind enough to bring me a witness for this preliminary hearing who is a real FBI, DEA, IRS agent, or a police detective or anything like that. And I do that because I want to expose the kids to as many legal professions as possible. In addition to that, I have taken over the library here at the Fresno Courthouse because it's Ninth Circuit space. So I asked our chief if I could do it. She said, do whatever. And so now we have really interesting exhibits for the students. So they'll come in and they'll learn about separation of powers. They'll learn about desegregation in public schools. They learn about voting rights. They learn about their search and seizure rights under the Fourth Amendment, which is really interesting because we bought some lockers and we tell them, okay, we're at your school. We have the dog. Can we start sniffing at your locker? Do the police need anything before they do that? Do you have any rights? What if you're a senior, but you're also 18? What weighs more? You are an adult, but you are still a student. So it's a really interesting way to do it. One of the things I would say that I work the most on, especially at the beginning of a clerkship, is honestly just building up my clerks. I am non-traditional in the way that I hire clerks. Some of the things that I look for are, not necessarily where you went to law school, but why you went there. So if you didn't go to like a top 5, but you tell me, well, Judge, I picked this school because it was near my home and my mother had cancer and I wanted to be nearby, that's going to make a difference. I also ask you, was English your first language? Because if it wasn't, I can understand and imagine that there were a lot of things that you might have to have experienced that were different than other folks. So a lot of my clerks, all of my clerks in my view thus far, have been just as great as the more traditional top 5 law school, top 1% law students who clerk, but they just don't know it. So part of it is awakening that in them. And part of the reason I do the field trips, in addition to exposing kids to the profession, is to have my lawyers, my law clerks see how other people view them. And I mean, the kids are like, wow, you're a lawyer, and wow, you went here. And for them to start building up their own confidence. Because I mean, I'm sure the judges can attest to this. 90% about being a good lawyer is having the confidence to go in and be able to explain yourself in a way that, will be able to get people on your side. So that's part of what we do. We meet every Wednesday. Well, we work in chambers, but every Wednesday we have a meeting and we talk about the cases, and they also do bench memos. They also help me with published opinions. We talk about whatever's going on in their lives, and they all get to know each other really well. I really encourage that. I encourage us to have an experience here in chambers where if one of them, for whatever reason, has to be out of town for a couple of days, somebody else will step in and handle their caseload without complaining about it, without anything. I said, at some point, you're all going to need that. You're all going to need each other at some point. So, approach it with an open mind and kindness. And that's another thing I also stress with them a lot is being kind. It's going to take you a long way because you don't understand when you're a brand new lawyer. If you ever want to be in a position where you're on a bench, whether it's state or federal, when they're vetting you, they are going to talk to everybody. They're going to talk to opposing counsel. They're going to talk to the people who clean your office and see how you treat them. And so kindness goes a long way. It's the right thing to do, but it also goes a long way. So when my clerks leave me, I always tell them, because I'd say 90% of them have nobody in the profession. They're first generation. They're the first in their families to be in this seat. And I tell them, you may not have a dad or a mom that's a lawyer or a judge or even in the profession, but now you have a Ninth Circuit judge that you can always call and you can always ask questions for and can help you navigate these things. And they're always on my conflict list. So they know I'm not going to be able to hear any of their cases because I want to continue having a relationship with them.
Since we're approaching the end of our hour, I'll combine one of our audience questions into the next question I was going to ask you all, which is, what are some of the qualities you look for in clerkship candidates? What makes a candidate stand out to you in the application process? And we'll start with Judge Faruqi and go in the same order.
I want to go real quick because I think Judge Dalba hit on this, but I want to be crystal clear. The one paragraph cover letter that just says attached is my resume and transcript, which I understand that a lot of law school clerkship coordinators tell you to do that because some judges want that. And they really do. They don't want to hear your life story. I just want you to think about it is like dating. You're also interviewing the judge, right? You don't want to get trapped in a relationship with somebody who is totally uninterested in your life story and what I think and what all the judges here, I think clearly think make you extraordinary. So maybe it's good to have a little bit of self-selecting. If your story is something, that is like that says, hey, I'm a first-gen law student, or here's the challenges that I had. I had to work throughout college. I just think those are the things that for me show grit. And that's the number one quality I'm looking for is grit. We're getting, there's an abundance of riches of law students who are smart and capable, but I want to find the person that has grit and that I hopefully that I can, as the judge says, Delva said, continue to be a force in their lives to support them, but don't hide your story. Don't hide who you are. That is your greatest strength. It is not a weakness.
I echo all of that. I'm one who I am not on Oscar, for example. So I want to know why you're trying to clerk here in Mississippi for me. So the standard, I know where some law clerk applications are coming from simply by looking at the cover letter because it would say I'm a third year or whatever. Here are my references, boom, and that's all. No, I want to know why you want to come here to Mississippi to work. I look at people who have a public interest background, people who have done clinicals. There are no. I don't use the law review. I don't use the top 10 as a reason for excluding others, saying that you must be a member of law review. You must be in the top 10% of your class because guess what? I was not. And I certainly thought I was a decent clerk. And if I put those type of barriers on others, I could not have hired myself. And I thought I was pretty decent. So public interest bent, clinical work, first generation people have a story to tell because, again, I'm looking for persons who could add to or who could add to what we do here in chambers. And we do believe that our ultimate goal is to do justice on every level. Justice can be painful now. I don't want you to think justice can be back-breaking at times, but I want us to leave with the power that we've done everything that we could to do justice at the end of the day. So I look at your life experiences, the things that you've done, what motivates you, how have you helped others. The clinical programs are important to me because I know if you're in law school, as I tell the students, you're in law school and you're doing a clinical, you have an obligation to somebody who has turned to you for help. That is, whether it's a housing law clinic, family law clinic, criminal clinic, you've been assigned the responsibility of helping somebody. But to balance that, you have one commitment while you're in law school. And that commitment is to you and your parents and others, and that is to get out of law school. So you have to learn how to balance life because that's what being a lawyer is about. It's about balancing life. So I look at the clinical work that one might have engaged in, and it can be on any level, appellate law clinic, any kind clinical work because you've had the responsibility of somebody has brought a problem to you for you to address, and you've had to balance their needs with your own needs and obligations.
So I'm very conscious of the fact that we are gatekeepers in so many ways. And state court's a little different in terms of who's interested in a state court clerkship. And then I only get 2 clerks, so not a lot of opportunities. And so what do I? So I will say I was just mentally trying to add it all up. I think I've at least had just as many clerks from law schools not in North Carolina as I have in North Carolina, and I've had at least 3 from Northeast, 1 from Midwest, 1 from California. So what I look for is someone who's been thoughtful about how the clerkship experience is going to further their career goals. I feel like there are too many people who just see clerkship as kind of like the 4th year of law school, or somebody told them they should do it, so they're going to do it. And I really want to caution people, you're going to learn a lot. You're going to get a lot of skills. You're going to see stuff and understand stuff that people who have never had clerkships won't. But there's also a lot of legal skills you're not going to get. You don't get to talk to clients. You don't get to learn how to work with community groups or business organizations, or there's a lot that you don't get to do because certainly with an appellate court, you're mainly doing research and writing. So how is that going to further your and so for example, one of the first clerks I hired, a Lumbee woman from Robeson County, North Carolina, and her goal was to become a lawyer for an Indian tribe. And I'm like, well, how is working for a North Carolina Supreme Court justice going to further that? We don't do much Indian law. Why does this make sense? And she had the perfect answer. She said, I know that part of what I'm going to be doing is helping set up a legal system. And so I want to understand how this legal system works, so I can, better advise my clients about what they should put in place. So that's a somewhat of a unique example, but everyone that works with me has some vision of why doing the work of a clerkship for the next year or 2 years will make a difference. And I will also just say that ACS has been really helpful in that regard too. I had a situation where I had hired someone for 2 years and they got a better offer to work at the Brennan Center, as a matter of fact. And so I needed someone really quickly, and ACS had some folks interested in coming to North Carolina and working with me and doing the cases we do. So I get folks from a variety of different ways, but being thoughtful is I like grades in which law school. I teach myself, so I kind of have this sense of I know good writing, and I know sometimes I feel like I know how arbitrary grades might actually be. So I'm not paying attention to those. I'm looking at, I need the basic skills, obviously. But I'm not too worried about class rank. I'm much more interested in how working with me will help you be the lawyer that you want to be.
I agree 100% with everything everyone has said. For me, being a judge is service. It's a job where we serve people. And so it's really important that you come in with that mindset, not with the mindset of, hey, this is a stepping stone for me to make more money and get a great clerkship bonus. I'm not the judge for you if that's why you're here. I want people to see you and say, wow, I can see myself because that person is there, and that person looks like me, and that person grew up where I grew up, and that person has the same background I have. And so for me, it's really important that you recognize that you become a symbol for people. People who otherwise would think I never could belong there. I don't fit in. I have a picture of the house I grew up in. It's literally a shack. I have it in Chambers. Every time I do a field trip, I bring the kids up to Chambers and I show them that picture of that house. And I have had kids literally raise their hand and say, I live in something like that right now. And I say, I'm sure you do, mijo. Look at this office. My Chambers is stunning. Federal court chambers, by and large, are always beautiful. We're just fortunate that way. But I show the kids that and I say, my actual Chambers itself, the actual office is bigger than the house I grew up in. And I tell them that. I said, look, I came from this tiny shack of a house without a bed to this. And the fact that you are in a similar situation where you don't have a bed, you're living with 2 or 3 different families in a tiny, tiny home should not tell you that you cannot be here. If anything, I'm your example. So I expect the same of my clerks. And I'm known for, literally known for people walking up to me and saying, "Hey, I heard you're a judge. Any chance I can, pick your brain for 5 minutes? Because I'm thinking about going to law school." Right before I came to sit for this Zoom, I was meeting with a young woman who just graduated from college and is thinking of applying to law school. And she just had general questions and didn't know anything and doesn't know anyone, and said, "Would you mind having coffee with me?" I said, "No, absolutely." So we had coffee, and I'm setting up a time for her to meet with my clerks. So my clerks know that there's that expectation as well. I mentor them, but I expect them to do the same for others. And so for me, the question about whether or not you should do a detailed letter for the specific judge, absolutely. I want to know why Fresno and why me, because we will build a strong relationship in this chambers. And if we don't see the world not exactly the same, I mean, we can disagree, especially on the law, but if we don't see it as a place of service and not just as a stepping stone, then it's not going to be a good fit.
Thank you all, including for some answers to one of our audience questions. We've got about 3 minutes left, so I'm going to try to combine combine and end us on a high note. What's one piece of advice that each of you have for those interested in clerking? It could be about qualities, to the extent you didn't answer that before, or something else you'd like students and early career attorneys to take away from our conversation this afternoon. And I'll start with Justice Earls, then Judge Faruqi, Judge Reeves, and Judge Alba.
Well, what first came to mind for me is to don't underestimate the incredible impact that you will have right away. I really rely on my clerks. I really appreciate their fresh coming to the law and the legal concepts and the jurisprudence and what is right. So have know that you're going to make a huge difference right away and come with that perspective.
I'll just echo that. I had a clerk who came in who was a public defender. I'm a former prosecutor, and I think she was mostly due to the pandemic. A lot of public defense jobs had to delay when people could start. And so I think some of it was necessity, but she was surprised that I guess I was receptive to hearing what she had to say and that it shaped how I was going to rule. I think as the justice said, I mean, law clerks are our conscience. And so don't think that because a judge does not share your ideology, does not share your viewpoint, your background, whatever it is, that you won't be able to help, bring them to a place that you think, where justice needs to be moving. So don't be a gatekeeper for yourself. You heard the justice say that we are often these gatekeepers. We cannot have that layered on top where you refuse to apply to something because you think like, oh, that person will listen to me. Now, again, by prior advice, in the interview process, things like that, you're going to suss out whether or not it's still a good fit for you. But don't do that from just looking at somebody on paper. I think apply broadly, both state, federal, geography, specialty courts, all of those things. Cast a wide net because if you're someone like most of us on this call where you didn't have a lot of connections, you need to increase the denominator.
Yeah. Your letters of recommendations matter. I look at, I think law school professors are, again, they're in the habit of doing letters, so they know what to say. But for those persons who you've worked for, who's given you deadlines, who've seen you come in and out of work on a daily basis and could tell that sort of story about your commitment to the work that is being done and meeting deadlines and things of that sort, that matters. But the real key that I will give you is do not exclusively decide on who you will target solely based on what president appointed you, because that is all a matter of compromise in many places. A red state president is looking for blue state appointments, and that's going to come from blue state senators. So do not rely exclusively on what president appointed you. The best way to find out who that person is to whom you're going to apply on the federal side is to go to the Senate Judiciary Questionnaire, which tells their life story. It tells it tells you the top 10 cases that they've ever worked on in life. Right? So this is what I want you to know, members of the Judiciary Committee. It tells you if you've served as a judge before, the 10 most impactful cases that you've decided in your life. It tells you every speech that you've given and to whom you've given those speeches to, the titles of those speeches, who you spoke to, what did you say. That tells you everything that you need to know about that individual. It talks about your entire life from the age of 18 until the day that you're nominated and even beyond. So that will give you the global perspective of who that person is. And if that person that you see on those papers don't align with your values in the way that you perceive, maybe you don't want to be the shadow clerk or whatever they call it. Maybe you want to be mentored by someone who has your life story in their papers, then that's the person who you apply to.
I couldn't agree more. Just because everything they said was spot on. One thing I just want to reiterate is just apply. Don't say I'm not good enough. I'm not qualified. I don't have the right, grades to, clerkships to whatever. Just apply. Apply, and we can't pick you if there is no application presented to us. So make sure you do that. Put your best foot forward. And when we ask, because I always ask in an interview, why do you want to clerk? My questions are twofold. Why do you want to clerk, comma, and why do you want to clerk for me? Be mindful of your answers and be prepared to answer that question for any judge that you, excuse me, that you apply to. Because we're all thinking it in some way or another. We may not articulate it quite as bluntly, but, just be prepared to answer those two questions.
Thank you so much. And as someone who I heard nothing back from the first round of clerkship applications I sent out, and it took another application cycle to finally find my way into clerkships that proved to be invaluable in terms of mentorship and experience. So with all that, I want to say thank you so much to our panelists. I want to say thank you in particular for lifting up these themes of mentorship, of not self-selecting out, of finding a judge who you connect with and being able to highlight that potential area overlap and connection throughout the application process. And before everyone goes, please make sure to check out the resources in the Clerkship Assistance Program that the put in the chat, and certainly look at both the American Constitution Society and the Appellate Project for more resources as you begin or continue your clerkship journey. Thank you all again so much, and thank you again to our panelists. Take care, everyone.